Hey, Three Crosses family, welcome back to the podcast. My name is AJ. I oversee life groups and discipleship. And today we are concluding our spiritual warfare series. Today we're talking about the key of spiritual warfare, and that is faith. We're going to be looking at Matthew 17, 14 to 20. So if you want to follow along, go ahead and flip there. But before we jump into the conversation, we want to tell you about what's going on with the podcast. And so if you haven't filled out our podcast survey yet, we'd encourage you to go to threecrosses.church/podcast. Tell us who you are, where you're listening from, and you can redeem a free coupon to neighborhood coffee. At the same time, we have introduced this idea of a question and answer episode at the end of the spiritual warfare series. And so if you haven't submitted your question yet, you can go to threecrosses.church/fall25. You can remain anonymous. You can tell us who you are and what your question is. And hopefully, as we wrap together our minds around these questions, we can present a Q&A episode answering some of your questions out there. So we'd love to hear from you guys through the survey, through the Q&A form. And that is what's going on with the podcast. We have one final conversation about spiritual warfare, talking about faith. And so with that, let's go deeper. Back in the podcast studio, one last time for spiritual warfare. Pastor Danny, wrapping up an amazing series.
It's been a great series. I don't know if you guys know this, but we added 2 extra weeks to the series.
A little bit of an extension here.
Yeah, last week on generosity, this week on faith. Just felt like, man, there's more to talk about in this concept, and it's an important concept. So it's been fun to keep plugging through it.
So we're talking about faith today, and you had mentioned it's the sort of key to unlock all of this. And I love that we're going to land this episode on faith because we've been talking about what it means to live a life of victory in this spiritual warfare, and it has to do a lot with faith. And so we're going to be looking and reading from Matthew 17, 14 to 20. So if you're following along at home, Matthew chapter 17, what I want to do, I want to read through this entire story that's going on because I think getting the context of it is great. And then I want to ask you some questions around the topic of faith. And so Matthew 17, starting at verse 14. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. "Lord, have mercy on my son," he said. "He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him." Jesus replies, "You unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Here's the critical moment here. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "Because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." So some bold statements about faith coming from the mouth of Jesus. And so even before we dive into a topic about this passage in general, I just want to zoom out a little bit and take a 1,000-foot view and ask, what is faith? We use that word faith. What do we mean by that? And maybe just zoom out into the entire scriptures. How does the Old Testament begin to inform us what faith is?
Yeah, when I think of faith, the first thing I think of is that it's a thing that we need to have some sort of relationship with God. So that concept, without faith, it's impossible to please God. Anyone who wants to please God needs to believe that he exists and that he responds to people as they have needs and ask of their needs. And so I think of passages like that in the New Testament. I think of Hebrews chapter 11, kind of this hall of faith, which starts not necessarily with a definition of faith, but a description of faith. That faith is the assurance of things hoped for. What is it? The something of things not seen. What is that word?
The confidence.
The confidence of things not seen.
Let's look it up.
It's in the Bible. We'll find it. And so, the reason I say it's not a definition, it's a description is because that's what it is, right? And so faith on one hand is kind of hard to define. So it's like we're describing it all over the place. But then as Hebrews 11 continues, the author of Hebrews describes what faith looks like in all of these Old Testament heroes, right? So there's like, he'll tell the story of Abraham, who had this kind of vision of a future land and didn't know what it looked like, but he walked by faith. And so kind of as we put all this together, we get this concept that faith is somehow trusting in this invisible plan of God, or these unseen things, whether it's an unseen future or an unseen reality. And so, faith in Jesus Christ, right, on one hand, it means trusting in Jesus Christ, but means trusting in Jesus, who is in some way intangible, invisible. Like, it's not just, if I said, hey, believe in me, I could either mean that literally, like believe that I exist, or I can mean like put your trust in me. And so putting your faith in Jesus Christ is trusting in him, but also has that invisible component that faith necessitates, where the thing that makes it faith in a relationship with God is that he is this unseen being that we cannot see with our eyes and touch with our hands right now, but we are just going to trust in him.
So we have Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. So there you go. Assurance. Assurance is that second word.
Assurance.
Confidence and assurance. As I was thinking about what to say to this question too, I was thinking of just the traditional way that you look for definitions of terms in scripture and Bible study in general. And so you have a word in the Greek, pisteo, pistos, I think it is.
Pistis is the noun, and then I think it's pistuo, maybe
Pistuo.
is the verb.
And what you do is you look at a Greek translation of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew words, and what you'll find is really only one term in the Hebrew is consistently translated in the Septuagint, and it's the word where we get Amen. Amen.
Really?
So the Yod, Mem, and Nun, I think it is. Amen.
Amen,
So anytime that you see that word in Hebrew, it translates to this word faith. And you see it all over the place. I think one of the places that even Paul highlights, Genesis 15. And so talking to Abram at the moment, God is promising that he's going to have a son. And it says he believed the Lord, and he counted to him as righteousness. And so you get Nehemiah passages that saying like, hey, remember Abram? His heart was faithful. And so you get believe popping up in Exodus 4. So like Moses is worried, are they going to believe me? Are they going to believe me? And then Exodus 14, all the plagues. And after that, it says, Israel saw the great power of the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord and they believed in the Lord. So having that confidence and assurance of what they used to not see, but now they've seen in the actions of the plagues and all that. So,
well, I think, we can go back to that Abram story for a second. Like, I think that's an important one because it really helps us to understand the construct that the biblical authors use for the rest of time to define faith. That there's this idea of, okay, there's a promise from God, right? So it's, Paul talks about these promises to Abram in the New Testament as well, but there's this promise that you're going to have a child, that you're going to inherit this land, that there's going to be this blessing. And the response to kind of becoming aware of the promises of God was, you really at that point couldn't do anything about them. Like, it's just believe it's going to happen, right? And so on one hand, right, it's just, if faith kind of at a real tangible or, first step level is if I'm like, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million tomorrow. Faith is like trusting I will, right? And so it's just like this belief, this trust that it's going to happen. And yet at the same time, this comes up in the Abram passages and also again in the New Testament in several different places. Faith doesn't really count unless it does do something, right? And so when you look at the hall of faith in Hebrews 11, it's like they believed it and then they patterned their lives after it, or right. James says, you have faith, I have works. Let me show you my faith by my works, by the things that I do. Like by your response to faith, you know that you actually have it. And so it's interesting because like the thing about faith is it's hard to know, am I just saying this? Or do I believe this, right? And so, it's if I say I'm going to give you $1 million today, like, yeah, I believe that. It's like, but then tomorrow, are you like waking up excited? Are you like driving to my house? Are you like calling me off the hook? Like, hey, when are you going to meet with me? And if you were doing that, I'd be like, wow, this guy really trusts that I'm going to give him $1 million. Like if you just kind of went off and you never brought it up again, it's like, okay, if this guy really believed that I was going to give him $1 million, he probably would have called me today, right? And so I think that is part of it, is that faith is a combination of trusting God at his word about something that's going to happen or that is happening, or a truth or a future, but then also believing in the sense that you start patterning your lives after it. So it reminds me a little bit of the concept of repentance in the New Testament, where we talk about repentance is kind of making a U-turn in life, but this definition that I love of repentance is it's a change of mind that's so drastic that it results in a change of everything in your life. And I think that's the same thing as the biblical authors describe faith. It's like, on one hand, it's just trusting God at his word, believing the truth that God reveals, but it's not really faith unless you do something. Like, unless it affects you in some way. You get to find out if they truly believed it or not by, did it affect them?
I think even another text that belief shows up too is in Deuteronomy, when Moses is looking back at the story of Israel, and he says, the Lord says, go up and take possession of the land that I've given you. Then you rebelled against the command and did not believe him or obey his voice. So it's the same thing, like you're saying, like, am I just saying these things, and then when push comes to shove, I retreat because I'm too afraid? Or, I think the example that pops into my mind, I was coaching baseball in one point of my life, and I told a player, like, wouldn't it be weird if I said, I have faith that you're going to do well in this situation, and then took you out of the game? Would I really have faith, or am I just saying that I have faith in you? So it does seem like they kind of go hand in hand, which is a very interesting concept, which we'll get into a little bit in this conversation. But I love that you pointed out Hebrews 11 there, because what I find fascinating in this conversation is you look back at the promises that were facing the Old Testament saints. So you had, Abel, for example, gets mentioned, where he offers a sacrifice out of faith that is greater than Cain's, that says in Hebrews 11. You have Noah, that is told, the only promise we really see for him is that there's going to be a flood. And so he gets commended for actually changing his life, having faith that it's going to happen, and building an ark. And then finally, Abraham, like you're saying, gets mentioned a lot of, hey, you're promised a new nation, and now do you have faith in me? His faith is commended for, like, okay, I believe that you're going to give me a son. I believe that you're going to give me a nation. So I'm going to move to a foreign place, live in a foreign land. I'm going to realign my life, which brings me to this question of the New Testament now. Because you might be thinking, okay, like those are promises that I'm probably not going to face in my life. Like, maybe the Lord's going to flood something and ask me to build an ark. Probably not. There's a promise in there that's probably not going to happen. But what are the promises facing us, especially as we turn the page from the Old Testament into the Gospels? What is Jesus calling us to have faith in? What is the promise that he is presenting?
I think of Jesus, and I think it's in the book of John. He says, trust in God, or believe in God, believe also in me. And I think that is the Greek word pisteuo there too, faith, have faith in. And really what Christ is calling us to believe in is himself, is that trusting in God means trusting that Jesus is the one and only begotten Son of the Father, sent to earth to live a life none of us could, to die on the cross for the sins of the world, to be buried, to raise on the third day, to ascend into heaven, to be seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And so really Christianity is simply just believing that. Yet, this is where the kind of faith in action thing that we've been talking about comes in, is that there are so many people. I mean, you ask almost anybody in our society. We live in a very post-Christian society, but you could ask almost anybody, hey, do you believe in God? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hey, do you believe in Jesus? Yeah, I believe in Jesus. He's very important to me. But then like 90% of those people, you're thinking like, I don't think you really do though, because like it doesn't seem to have impacted your life in any way. Like in terms of your morality, in terms of your decision-making and your church attendance, right? There's nothing in your life that seems to indicate that you've been changed in any way by this truth you claim to believe. And that's where kind of we get this wrestling match in James about faith and works. He says that faith without works is dead. And it's like, maybe you have faith, but it's not alive. Like it's a thing that you hung on your wall, but it's not real. You just say you believe it. The way you know that a faith is living and active is because it does something to you. So if someone else said, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus, and then you start watching their life and you see that they have a pattern of prayer, that they go to church, that they give to the poor, that they do all these things. It's like, these seem to be outward manifestations of the truth or the veracity of the faith that they claim to have within them. And so, that's where it gets real sticky, because we're always trying to walk a line of like, we're not saying that doing these things equals faith. Mm-hmm. We're saying faith is faith. It's like you trust God, you believe the truth of this message. But the question in the scriptures is really, do you really believe the truth of this message? And if you do, most likely you're going to see that lived out, right? Mm. If Abraham just said, yeah, God, I trust that you've got a future for me in this other land, but he never left his home and went to this other land. Mm-hmm. Be like, did he really believe God? Right? And so that's what these ancients are commended for, is whatever this portion of truth that God revealed to them, whether it's Cain and Abel around offerings, or it's Abraham around a promised land, whatever it is, they didn't just like take it to the bank and say, yeah, clock it, God, I got this. They said, okay, I better pattern my life around this. Like, this is true. I got to live it out.
Let's go to that sticky place, because I know this whole conversation gets all sorts of airtime, especially in the church world. So I want to bring that up, because I do think, like, even in the passage that we just read about being able to drive out demons, there's something about having faith and performing that work that get tied up together. So I want to just make sure that we're clear on this conversation in terms of the relationship between faith and works. And so to preface it, let me just read the passage again. The disciples came to Jesus in private, asked, why couldn't we drive out the demons? And he replied, because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. It seems like there's a connection there. And then you go to the book of Acts, you all of a sudden turn and you see that faith is connected with things like baptism, confession, healings, the acts of the Holy Spirit, purification, sanctification. It's like faith and something. There's like a pairing there. And then you get to this conversation that we've been having where Paul is pretty adamant, but I mean, I think Ephesians 2 here, by grace through faith. That is like one of the pillars of Protestant theology. By grace through faith, I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God for salvation for everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. As it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. So faith is a big thing. And then James comes in and says, well, faith without works is dead. So help us unpack the stickiness of this situation. What would we say is proper doctrine around this?
Yeah, it's funny. I think this is Alistair Begg, who's I think he's a Scottish preacher. Okay. Who one time was asked, like, well, how do you reconcile, this idea of faith with this idea of works? And his response I love. He said, well, why do you need to reconcile friends? Like, these two doctrines are friends. Like, they don't need reconciliation, right? And I think once you can understand it, you realize, like, these are not combating doctrines. This is, right? Paul says that faith, that salvation comes by faith alone. And James really picks up the argument and says, okay, well, let's talk about that. Like, what if you say, I believe in Jesus, like you just believe he exists? Like, is that saving faith? Like, can such faith save this person, right? He says the demons believe that, right? So if like that was saving faith, then Satan and his minions are all going to heaven, right? So it's not merely believing the right truth about God. There's something that indicates that you believe it in a way that indicates that it's a true, legitimate faith. And James brings out, like, there's these works that come out of it. Like, there's something that emerges from faith. So like Satan believes that Jesus exists, but he's set his existence on tearing down what Christ is doing. That's not saving faith. Saving faith is when you're like, Jesus exists, and that means that everything about my life and everything that I've thought before needs to change. And then all of a sudden your life starts kind of morphing into the image of this truth. That's how you know that you really believe it, right? It's not, you just believe that it's true, but it's, right? And so this is where it gets a little intangible, but it's like, I don't feel like it needs to be reconciled, where if you're like, oh no, I believe that, we see this all the time. We call it hypocrisy. Someone's like, oh no, I believe that Christians need to have upright character. And then you find out they have the secret life behind closed doors. It's like,
right.
Wait, what? Like, do you believe that or not? And if you believe it, then why are you living this way? Like, there's a disconnect. And so I think that's the disconnect that these authors like James are trying to bring out, is just saying you believe in God it does not indicate that you have saving faith. There's something about faith where you've actually rested in this thing. That's right. So that the analogy that's used a lot is in terms of faith is like, I can say like, I trust that this chair can hold my weight, but if I refuse to sit in it and you can tell that I'm scared, I'm lying, right? I don't really trust it. Like the way that you know that the person really trusts it is then they sit down in the chair, And so, we could argue all day about people who would be like, well, I do trust it. I just don't feel like sitting down right now. It's like, okay, right? But I rarely have that conversation with people. I trust in God. I just don't think it's time. It's like, even when they do, it's like, do you really trust him, right? This is just a normal, right? When it comes to normal everyday things, like, oh no, yeah, I trust that school's important, but then they, don't do their homework. It's like, I don't think you really believe. Like if you believed it, you would pattern your life in a way that shows it as a priority. I think you think that hanging out with your friends is more important. It's like, no, I think school's more important. It's like, I don't think you do, right? Like your actions, right? We always say actions speak louder than words, right? And so I think it's not that words don't matter. It's not that what you say you believe doesn't matter, but it's like people will know if what you say you believe is something you truly believe by the way the rest of your life wraps around these things that you say.
What would you say to encourage somebody, as we're on this conversation, what would you say to encourage somebody that feels like they're in this position of, well, I've been sort of like this nominal Christian by name only, Christian by simply like what you were saying, like I say that I believe in Jesus, I say that I believe in God, but there hasn't been too much change in the direction of obedience towards Jesus's commands or following him. What would you encourage them to wrestle with in terms of this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty rare that I would meet someone who says it like that.
Okay.
And so I think first of all, if I did meet someone who said it like that, I'd be like, I think you're in a really good place.
But they may not even know, right?
Yeah, I think most of the time, I hear someone talk, they're just like, oh no, I believe in Jesus and that's it. Or they'll say something like, that indicates that they don't really understand Christianity. What they'll say like, oh yeah, like I really want to be a Christian. I'm trying, I'm just not doing a very good job at it. And you're like, oh, I don't think you actually really understand what this is, right? And so if somebody comes and says what you said, I'm just a nominal Christian, I want to do better. It's like, I think they're actually in a really good place because they understand that Christianity is about believing something, but it needs to impact our lives in some way. And so I'd probably start a conversation about like, well, hey, what does it mean for you to follow after Jesus Christ? What are these things that you believe that you're not doing? Because chances are there's specific things in their mind of like, oh yeah, like I really do want to get connected in church more. Yeah, I really feel like I need to read the scriptures. Yeah, right. And so that takes discernment. Sometimes it's like they're trying to like create a works-based righteousness, and you get this indication as you talk to them that they think like they really are a Christian, but they think they're not one because they don't do enough stuff for God. Other times, if it's this case you're talking about, I would just encourage them and say like, well, hey, that's awesome. Like start doing that stuff. Like, if you feel like you should go to church, go to church. Like I think that's a great thing for you to do, Yeah. And if it's that other type of person who's saying like, yeah, I really want to be a Christian. I'm trying hard at it, but I just don't think I'm trying hard enough. I would probably just come back to the gospel and say, hey, well, here's the good news. Christianity is not really about trying hard. Christianity is really about trusting in what Christ has already done. He tried real hard, right? He's the one and succeeded. He died on the cross for our sins. He rose from the grave. Christianity really is about trusting in him. And so any works that we do is in response to the work that he's done on our behalf, not to earn his favor. And so, talk about that idea of like, hey, so grace is not opposed to effort, Dallas Willard says, but grace is opposed to earning. So we don't do these things to earn favor with God.
Right.
But hey, yeah, we do exert effort as Christians. That's part of what faith is. We have this animation to go and do something with what we believe.
Yeah, I love that line. Can you say it again? Grace isn't opposed to
Grace is not
earning.
Opposed to effort. Grace is not opposed to effort.
Got it. It is opposed to earning something.
Opposed to earning, yes.
So I'm not trying to earn something, but the way that I'm working righteously in this life, but there is effort. There is something that because Jesus is who he says he was, and I believe that, a lifestyle should follow. And it's one, like Paul says, run the race, right? It's one that says, fight the good fight. What good works do you have for me in front of me? And one toward obedience. Thinking of the combination of, if you love me, you obey my commandments. Yes. So it's like this marriage. They're friends. I love that. They're friends. Why reconcile friends? There you go.
Or I mean, you think of the right, like the classic example. I think this is Matthew 25, the sheep and the goats parable, where these people come before Jesus and the last day, and they're like, well, wait, I cast out demons in your name. I did all these kind of things. And it's like, I had the works. And then Jesus says, like, no, depart from me. I never knew you. Right. So there's this idea that like faith is entering into a relationship with God by trusting in what Christ has done. And when you do that, it results in good works. But if you try to do any of those components before faith, so you're like, I'm just going to do good works, but I don't know Jesus, it's like, that's not Christianity, right? Or if it's like, oh, I'm just going to do good works to earn Jesus' favor, that's not Christianity. It's like, no, I'm going to trust in Jesus. I'm going to believe in the work that he's done. I'm going to experience his grace. And then out of the overflow or the response to that, it's going to start to change my life. And so that's how it's like, I know my faith is alive. Right? We're going to do our Advent series, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but starting next week, our Advent series is walking through the book of 1 John. And 1 John, in the book, John gives us these different reassurances of how do I know that my faith is alive, right? How do I know, right? He says, I write these things that you might know that you belong to Jesus. And so he talks things about, do you believe in the real Jesus? Like when you are praying to Jesus, are you praying to the right guy, right? Do you believe in the Jesus the apostles believed in? Do you walk in the light, right? Is how he says that. Are you fleeing from evil? Like, or are you still in sin? Or are you saying like, man, my faith has made it so I want to walk away from this stuff that used to entangle me? Do you love the brothers and sisters in the church community, right? He has all these different tests we can apply to ourselves to find out if the faith that we claim to have is really alive and kicking, you know? And so it's almost like vital signs where it's like, you know, you show up as a medic and you're like, is this person alive? Like, they're moving, but maybe that's just like spasms post-mortem or something. You know?
Right.
So anyway, I do think it's a very important distinction. I don't think it's just theological buzzwords. I think it's super important that like, it's like marriage vows. Like making the marriage vows is very important. But if you make the marriage vows and then you don't live up to them, what good are the marriage vows, right? Like the way you know that somebody meant the marriage vows is they live them out. And when they don't, they come back and apologize. And so that the works is important because it shows the veracity of the claim that you made.
Yeah, and I love that we're ending this series, the spiritual warfare series, on this conversation about faith. Because as we're talking, I'm imagining like, why is faith the key? And I'm already starting to see how it can unlock this whole world of new behaviors, of new disciplines, of literally entering into the spiritual warfare with all the tools and armor that we've talked about already. And I love that because that we're talking about how faith leads to works. It's not opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning. And it kind of matches with Hebrews 11 again, where the hall of faith goes, we get the list of Old Testament saints, and then it talks about all these different situations that the early Israelites went through. And so, by faith, they conquered kingdoms. They enforced justice. They attained promises. They stopped the mouths of lions. They quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they may rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. And it just goes on and on about these things. And then it lands in chapter 12. It says, therefore, since we're surrounded by a great cloud of witness of people of faith, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance. Like, let us continue to make this effort. And so I want to go back to our passage because it talks about us having so little faith. And then it says, truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. I've driven down the I-5 a lot, and I've not seen mountains move. I've driven by things. Is it because I lack faith? My question here is, as you were wrestling with this topic of faith, and as you were wrestling with, okay, what is being unlocked? Like, what is Jesus trying to tell us by saying, faith as small as a mustard seed? It can unlock this amazing thing of moving mountains. Like what are we supposed to get out of that? Are we supposed to like look at mountains and be like, try really hard to have faith and then have it move? Or what are we getting at here?
Yeah, I mean, I think a number of things. I think this is a powerful statement that Jesus makes that really helps kind of pull back the curtain of how faith works. Because on one hand, it's an indictment, right? You have little faith, he says to the disciples. And then he says, if you even had faith the size of a mustard seed, which he's already established and research establishes is the smallest thing imaginable, right? So he's trying to pick the smallest thing imaginable. So Jesus is saying, figuratively, if you had literally the smallest amount of faith imaginable, you could move a mountain with your words. So like, on one hand, it's an indictment. Like they don't have any faith at all, because if they had the smallest amount imaginable, they could do amazing things. If they could do nothing, they must have none. On the second layer of it, it's more of a general principle that a tiny amount of faith is enough to do great things. So he's not challenging them to have tons of faith. Really, there's also a principle here of like, it doesn't take much. We talked about this on Sunday. It doesn't take much faith to do great things. I think the third thing that really helps us to understand the nature of faith is what you're just talking about. So it's like, well, okay, well, if that were true, then if I went to a mountain and believed just a little bit that it would move, and then I told it to move, it would move, right? And the answer is yes. But then the question is, well, then how come I can't do that? And I would guess it's because none of us really believe that a mountain would move if we make it move, right? And this is where we could easily go on the wrong path. Because so then it's like, okay, then I'm going to work harder to believe it. And then we're going to conjure up belief, like mountain move. Yeah. I really believe you're going to move. It's like, I think now we're getting off on the wrong exit of this freeway.
Okay.
Because I think the most important thing we need to understand to interpret every single passage we've talked about so far, that's always hidden like right in plain sight in every passage, is that faith always begins with God. Like he is the one who always initiates faith, right? So we go back to Hebrews 11, right? Abraham believed what? Something that God revealed to him, right? It's Abel believed what? Something. We don't even get to find out in Genesis 4, right? He believed something and it made him give this offering to the Lord that pleased him in some way. Like something starts with God. Yeah. And so faith is a response to something that God has revealed. So I do deeply believe. I don't believe that I can go out and move a mountain like in the back parking lot here with my words. And maybe that's why I can't move it. But I do believe that if God wanted me to move a mountain with my words, he would like gift me, faith is a gift from God. He would gift me this vision, this faith to do it. And then I would go out and I'd tell the mountain to move and it would, right? And I think one of the best examples of this playing out in real life is the story of Peter walking on water, right? So we see Peter, this is one of the cases where disciples are literally doing something impossible, right? He's walking on water, which is physically impossible. It's a genuine miracle, and not even like casting out a demon, which is like, okay, there's these spiritual entities at play. He's like walking on top of like a liquid, right? And so, but when you kind of look back at the mechanics of how it works, we see that he understands faith correctly. So he sees Jesus walking on water. And then he doesn't like, well, if Jesus can do it, I can do it. That's not what he does. He looks at Jesus and he says, if it's you, ask me to come to you on the water, or tell me. I can't remember. Ask me or tell me. But and he almost like puts the ball in Jesus's court. Like, if you ask me to do it, I can respond in faith. But that's the important combination is
Got it.
God invites you to do something, and then you respond with faith in what God has revealed, and then anything is possible. Jesus says, come on out to me on the water, and he does it. And we get to see that as long as he keeps his eyes on Jesus, he can do the thing that Jesus has asked him to do. But whenever he takes his eyes off Jesus, it reminds us that now he's trusting in himself, or now he's realizing like, what, this is impossible. And he starts to sink. And so then he has to reach his hand out to Jesus to be saved again. And so we get to see this whole interplay that faith starts with God, responds by us, and then proven that we believe it by actually walking into it. And when we prove we disbelieve it, it starts to fall apart, right? And so this is everything in the Christian life. And that's where I feel like it's so helpful to understand this passage, is that he's telling the disciples, listen, if you asked, like they asked him to come and help, cast this demon out, he could. This comes out by prayer. But really, it's like maybe they just didn't believe hard enough they could cast out the demon. Maybe they were kind of trusting in their own power to cast out the demon. Or maybe they realized like, hey, you know what? This is going to take something where you're going to need to get something from me before you can respond, right? Faith is a response to what God has already revealed. And so I think that's helpful for us as we kind of think about this tactically, is that faith is not us initiating something. Faith is a response to something that God is initiating.
That's really helpful. That's a really helpful picture to even think about. Okay, well, the person in the passage in the previous verses went to Jesus, and Jesus is the one saying, like, I just wonder in that moment, did the disciples go to him? And it sounds like the answer might be no.
Well, the funny thing, no, yes, looks like it's a no. And the only person that seems to lack faith in the passage is the dad, right? Because he's the one who's like, he reveals like, help my unbelief. Like, right?
Yeah.
And he's the one who receives the miracle. It's like, so like he calls the generation unbelieving and perverse. He calls the disciples lacking faith. None of them asked Jesus for anything that and yet this guy who like presents as a faithless guy, I believe, help my unbelief. That was enough faith to activate a miracle in his son's life. Was he saw that Jesus wanted to heal him, right? That Jesus is the one who initiated that. He comes to him and it's like, I tried to get help from your disciples. I couldn't. And how long has this been going on? He does some diagnostic questioning. And then Jesus says, anything is possible for he who believes. And this is like an implicit invitation, right? Like, are you going to believe? Jesus initiates, do you believe? And he says, I do. And then he admits, but I don't. And then he prays, will you help that which I, right?
Right.
And so it's like, maybe that's the smallest amount of faith imaginable. But that mustard seed of faith caused great results. Like, that's all. Jesus like, I need something to work with. I'll work with that, right? And so I don't think Jesus needs something to work with. But like, that seems to be how he works, is he initiates, we respond with the littlest bit of faith, and he shows up in great ways.
Yeah. The phrase that's sticking out in my mind is his approach with the mustard seed of faith is better than no approach at all, like nothing at all, because then you don't have anything. And a mustard seed is better than nothing, I suppose.
Well, and what the biblical authors in the New Testament make over and over again, especially James, we've talked about, is that faith with works, any level of works, is way better than tons of quote unquote faith that does nothing. So it's like the person who knows everything about the Bible, who studied a ton, is like, oh yeah, I believe so much about God and in God and whatever, and like does nothing with that. Is that person really better than the person who's like a new Christian, but they go and lead someone to faith because they just wanted to share? That person's actually doing something. Like that's, their faith is alive. This other person's faith, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Like dead can either mean like it's dead, or it's like you're making fun of the person. Like it's useless. Like that. I mean, that's another word that's used for it. What use is that? What good is that? James asks.
So let's put this in our context now, 21st century context, because I love that picture of going to Jesus first to receive anything that resembles faith. It's the gift of faith that's given to us, and then we're called to respond in a certain way. And we'll get to unbelief in a second. But before we even get there, let's just imagine somebody listening, pausing this video right now and going to the Lord and saying, Lord, what do you want me to have faith in? What do you think they would hear from him at that moment? What do you think the Lord wants us to have faith in the 21st century, Three Crosses Church? Like, what are we called to have faith in?
Yeah, I think the first thing that God would say, no matter what the context, would be, believe in me. Like, I want you to have faith in me. I want you to have faith in my son. Have faith in the truth of the gospel. I think if you're like, no, God, beyond that, like, what else do you want me to believe? I think God would start a conversation with you, like either as you're kind of brainstorming with him in prayer, or just in life. Like, you'll just notice that God will start giving you stuff to believe, right? You'll start, maybe his voice doesn't come from the heavens and tell you, but maybe it's like later in the day, you're like, oh no, like, I just don't think that I'm going to be able to pay my bills this month. And you get this sense that God's like, hey, trust me, right? Like, we got this, and you're going to decide, like, do I want to believe or not, right? And so, and again, that now you have this fork in the road. What does belief mean? Like, does it mean like, oh, good, I'm going to quit my job and go home and wait for the mailman to come bring me my check or whatever? Or is it like, no, I'm going to keep working hard. I'm going to trust it's all going to work out, right? Part of that is you're asking God, well, what do you want me to do with this, right? You're starting this dynamic conversation with the Lord of, okay, I do believe that you're going to provide for me. I don't think you're telling me to quit my job and just let you provide for me. I think what you're telling me to do is to keep working, keep trusting in the Lord, keep looking for extra work, all these different things, but not to worry because you got this, right? And it doesn't really change what we do in that case, but it changes how we do it. Other times it's like you're going to get this thought like, man, somebody's going through a hard time. I wonder how their day's been. And you're going to think like, man, I wonder if God wants me to reach out to them? And it's like, maybe God brought them to my mind to pray for them. Maybe he wants you to reach out. So you pick up the phone, you call them and see what happens, right? And it's like, yeah, every once in a while, like legitimately somebody's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you called me. I'm having the worst day. Like, like God just told me to reach out to you. He's like, oh my gosh, wow, this is amazing. Most of the time it's just like, someone's like, oh, hey, thanks for calling. And it's like, you're just trusting. This is faith. You're trusting that you responded positively to some inkling of thought that God put on your heart. And you're trying to figure out what it means to walk by faith, to live your life, not by sight, by doing what you see best or what you think is the best thing to do, but really say, okay, God, what do you want me to do? Right. And so sometimes it's like spiritual where God like lays stuff on your heart or in your mind. Other times it's real practical, right? So it's walking by faith is like, I have this opportunity to make money, but it's unethical. I'm going to say no, right? It's not like, oh God, what do I do? It's like, well, you know what to do. Don't do it. Like it's bad, right? But it's like walking by faith is choosing to live in a way that theoretically puts you in the poorhouse, but you trust is what God would want you to do. Like that's walking by faith, even though it's less spiritual, it's very practical. But walking by faith is really like, I've got this vision of God's kingdom and his son. And I want to live on this narrow road that leads to life. I want to be a person of character. I want to be a person of love. I want to be a person who responds to the Spirit of God. And so I'm just going to, when it comes down to it, I'm going to choose to walk on that road, not on the road the wide road that leads to destruction. That's the life of faith, is just choosing to take one step after another, following God's plan, not following your plan.
Yeah, I almost want to argue that this entire series is a step of faith in a lot of senses too, because this is stuff that we can't see, right? And it's an assurance coming from the Lord who revealed all of this in Scripture that, hey, this is the way that I want you to operate in life, is in light of this kingdom, in light of this spiritual war going on. And so, I can imagine as the Lord is, as you're interacting with the Lord and taking steps, even throughout this series of obedience, thinking about what can I do to pray more? What can I do to give more? What can I do to, show the Lord that I'm offering myself as a living sacrifice to him. And yeah, I just think of even the promise of Jesus coming too. Like we talked about how each person in the Old Testament faced a promise from God. And it does feel like Revelation is kind of a promise that Jesus is coming back. And so it's operating in that light as well. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of faith aspects of going to the Lord, going to prayer and receiving almost a new reality to operate under. And it's a question of, are we going to believe that and change the way we live because of that? So, I love that we're wrapping up the spiritual warfare series with this concept of faith, talking about faith that starts with the gospel, that leaks into everyday life. I love just the idea of us interacting with the Lord and saying, all right, Lord, like, what is my next step? What should I do? And then him saying, trust me, I got this, and operating with that in mind. I do want to bring up the response from the Father here, because in Mark 9, you brought up the fact that he says, help me in my unbelief. So Mark 9 has a little insert. It says, Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has this been? From childhood, he answered, it has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus says, if you can, everything is possible for one who believes. And then immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief. So let's talk about unbelief here. What are some warnings that come with this passage of unbelief? Like what maybe are some warning signs where we're entering into a season of unbelief that maybe we should be aware of? And then talk to us more about some of the encouragements you see by the Father saying, help me in my unbelief.
Yeah, I think the warnings, I think almost exclusively are not from or at the Father. So I think the warnings are about this wicked, perverse generation, right? And so it's like, you see Jesus emerge on the scene, right? He's just come off of the Mount of Transfiguration, and kind of we had a glimpse of his kingdom, his glory. And now he has this reality check that he's back in this world where terrible things happen, where little kids are demonized. And people just have they don't believe in Jesus. They have a lack of faith in God's provision. Something has happened to allow this demon to have access to a young child, right? And so it doesn't necessarily mean it was his fault, but it's like we live in this fallen world. And so you see Jesus just like, man, the faithlessness of this world is like wreaking havoc and chaos everywhere. And so I think there's a warning that like living faithless lives is like bleak, desolate, and dangerous. And the culture we live in, an unbelieving culture, is a culture that opens doors to all this demonic grossness. And you see the lament of Jesus, or the anger, right? Like, you unbelieving and perverse generation. I think there's some type of warning to the disciples that we don't completely know what it is, right? Because we don't know what about them lacked faith. But it doesn't feel like this is just an encouragement, like, oh guys, like next time just call me, I got this. You know?
Right.
It feels
Indicting.
like there's an indictment there. And I think the beautiful thing and hard thing about this passage, like this is part of the reasons that we know the scriptures are true, is that like they're not written, made up stories to merely teach us stuff. They're recounting events that actually happened. And so it's like, we see that because like Mark and, is it Matthew? Matthew and Mark's accounts have some variations in them. We also see that because like there's all this subtext that probably would have made sense if you were there or if you were the person, but like we're reading it, we're like, what is happening here? Right? And so we don't know exactly what the indictment is to the disciples, besides like even people who are in ministry need to be conscious of like actively trusting in Jesus and responding to his promptings. Who knows what they were doing wrong? But then the Father, it's interesting because he comes to Jesus and the first thing he does is praise to Jesus. Like, Lord, have mercy on my son. He's in a really bad place. And if you can help, right? And this is what we don't know. We don't know from him saying, if you can, you should help him, if he really doesn't believe, or if that's just like how people talk, right? So it's like, you know, like you go to your contractor and be like, hey, if you're able to fix this, that would be awesome. It's like, he's like, if I'm able, it's like, okay, I know you're able to. I'm really just saying, like, I'm just not trying to impose, you know. At the same time, like he does indicate, he does have a lack of belief, right? And so if you can, everything is possible to him who believes. So Jesus, I was about to say, Jesus puts his back on him. Like, here comes the real question. Who is the one who believes? Because Jesus believes, and everything is possible for Jesus who believes. But it seems like he's talking to the man who says, I believe, help my unbelief. And so we don't know. There's a chance he's just like, you know, I believe, help my unbelief. There's also a chance that he's like, I believe. And then he's like, oh my gosh, I really don't though. Like he feels like exposed before Jesus, like, help my unbelief, you know? But the crazy thing, especially when we map it onto his conversation with the disciples with mustard seeds, like that's enough. Like that's enough. It's like, he took the little faith he had, like, and we know he had, like, this guy is scared he has no faith. We know that he does though, because he came to Jesus. He asked Jesus to have mercy on him. Like, he's directing anything he can muster up, it comes right to Jesus. So like, as long as your faith, as little as it is directed to the right entity, it can have powerful results. And so he comes to Jesus with a little that he has. Jesus calls him out on the fact he has a little, and he's like, yeah, I don't have much. Like, help me with that too while you're at it. And I'm sure he does, right? I'm sure this guy has much more faith walking away from that that encounter than he did walking in. And so, yeah, that's why I don't feel like there's that much indictment on the guy. I think it's less of an indictment like it is on the disciples in the generation. And it's more of just an honest conversation where it's like, yeah, you don't have a lot of faith. I'm going to heal your son. And then he tells the disciples, it only takes a little. Like, I don't need him to like muster up more faith for me. This is not like a pony show or something. Like, I'm not making him perform. I'm just, this guy's in need. He came to me and he asked. And so that's enough, man. What do I do? Like, make him dance for it? Like, you know, whatever he needs, you know? So, you see the humanity there too, of like, it doesn't take much, but if you take what little you have and you direct it at Jesus, like, amazing things happen.
I think that's such a good final word, especially after the entire spiritual warfare journey that we've been on. We've seen a lot of different passages. We've seen, talked a lot about different practices, a lot of different encouragements. How would you say this final picture encapsulates your final words on the spiritual warfare series?
Yeah, I think I mentioned on Sunday, some of us are like, irritated because we didn't really get to the meat of spiritual warfare. Like, I want to learn how to cast out demons. I want to learn how to like raise dead people or whatever, you know? And it's like, but I think if that's you, I get it. But I think that's exactly why we wanted to end here, is that like what the teachings of the scriptures on spiritual warfare, are not teachings that equip you to like become a demon hunter. This is where we started this series. Like, so it's, you're not going to be like, I'm going to run out and be like, okay, I guess I have this power because of Jesus. And I'm zapping like a Ghostbuster. I'm zapping these demons out of people. Like that gets people in big trouble in the New Testament, right? Where the demons come back. They're like, I know Jesus. I know Paul. Who are you? Right? So like when you outstep the faith that God has given you and you just try to conjure up spiritual victory, that's not Christianity, that's sorcery, right? Sorcery is trying to conjure up spiritual power. Christianity is responding in faith to what God has revealed. And so the reason I wanted to end with this and not like, how do you go and become a demon hunter is because if you understand this concept, you can have powerful encounters with demonic beings. Like if God calls you to, like, so it's like, yeah, don't run down the street and start like trying to zap demons out of people. But if you're walking down the street and you just get into a conversation with someone, all of a sudden something in you is like, this person is demonized, and you start to kind of not poke at the demon, but poke at it a little bit by saying like, hey, do you have faith in Jesus Christ? And all of a sudden they're talking another language, or like something real demonic is happening. You might feel like God is saying like, I want you to pray for them. This demon leaves them right now. And you're like, this is kind of weird, but can I pray for you that this demon leaves you right now? And then miracles can happen, right? But you are not initiating the miracle. God is always the initiator of the miracle. Faith is responding to what God has revealed. And so I wanted to end the spiritual warfare battle conversation with faith, because faith is the key. Because as you walk into life, knowing that there's an invisible battle, knowing that there's an enemy, that he's coming after us, but he can't take us down. We are wearing the armor of God. Let's walk in that. We can pray. We can preach the gospel. We can give generously. And as we walk through life, when things happen and we get the sense from the Lord that he wants us to step in on his behalf and intervene, faith is really responding positively to that call and saying, okay, I'll pray, or okay, I'll say that even though it makes me feel uncomfortable, or okay, I'll make that phone call, or I'll go and sit at that bedside, or I'll give that money, whatever it is. And that is spiritual warfare. That is faith, is being deployed by God as one of his foot soldiers in warfare to go and carry out this mission that he's given you. And so as much as we wish that spiritual warfare was like, hey, put on this machine gun and run out and start killing demons, it's like, I don't think that's how it works. I think like living a mindful life around the concept of spiritual warfare is almost like you turn on your comms, right? So you can hear God's voice through prayer. And when God gives you instruction, you say, yes, sir. And you respond positively to that call. That's called faith. And no matter what he calls you to do, if God said to you in that moment, I want you to tell this mountain to go into the sea, it would, right? The reason it doesn't do that is because he didn't tell you to do that. Right? So I think that's, and again, we're not tied with results. We're tied to obedience. So like there's going to be chances too where God tells you to do something and you don't get the results you think you're going to get. So part of faith is trusting that like I was obedient to what God told me to do. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but also maybe God has a result that I don't understand. He just wanted me to be part of this. So faith becomes the key for all of that.
And I suppose the encouraging word that I'm hearing too in all this is if faith is the thing that unlocks it, the Lord doesn't need that much, because I can imagine you listening out there thinking like, man, they've walked through so many heroes of the faith. And we look at Paul and we look at Peter, like Peter walked on water. That's crazy. And yet I think we can sometimes magnify their faith. And I'm sure the human experience is, at least in my Christian walk, has been, hey, I feel like the Lord's nudge in my life, and then I have like a million reasons why I shouldn't do it.
Well, and I think that's important, because I think I think that's where we get to like those James passages of like, so if you're sitting at coffee with someone and they're sharing their story and you feel like God's saying, hey, I want you to share the gospel with this person. And you stumble through it, you mess up your words, you don't do it great. It's like God can use that to change that person's life. It does not take perfection. It just takes responding positively. At the same time, if God nudges you, hey, share the gospel with this person, and you're wrestling, and you're praying, you're looking for opportunities, and you just don't, you're like, man, what happened? It's like you had no faith. Like you literally had zero amount of faith, not even a mustard seed. Like you didn't do anything, right? And so it doesn't matter how much you wanted to, doesn't matter what your intention was. Like if it doesn't turn into a modicum of action,
right,
there was no faith, right? And I think that is the little bit of the binary of faith is like, faith is responding in obedience to what God has revealed. And so responding in obedience would be opening your mouth and saying something, right? Again, if you if you open your mouth, you try to share the gospel, then they interrupt you and you can't get a word in. You had faith. They weren't listening, right? But I think a lot of times, right, that's where that binary comes in. And that's where James is talking about is like, you can say you have faith all day long, but if God is giving you something to obey and you refuse to obey it over and over again, like, are you really a follower of God? Where are you following him?
Yeah.
Right? It's you say you are, but you're just sitting here. You know? You're not following anybody.
And it's even in the midst of the Father's doubts, even in the whirlwind of thoughts that, I could think of even Abram's life, or even anybody in that hall of faith, like Moses, where he 5 times says, Lord, don't send me. I don't speak very well, sort of thing. Even amidst all those doubts, like, they took action, And so it's like going into it, stepping into it, having that mustard seed, like it is something. And then praying to the Lord, like, just help me with these doubts. Help me with the unbelief.
And that's encouraging right on the other side. That's real encouraging because these patriarchs, especially as we're talking about Hebrews 11, they messed up so many times.
Right.
And it's, even like Abraham and Sarah, it's like, you're going to have a child. And Sarah's like, what? And everyone's like, I don't know. Right. And it's like, he believed God. It was credited to him as righteousness. It's like, that's enough belief. Like, they weren't sure at all. It seemed like they didn't believe,
Right.
And yet, like, when you take a zoom out in Hebrews 11, they're not looking at like individual moments primarily. It's like they're looking at the trajectory of these folks' lives, where it's like Abraham did move from Ur to the promised land. And
he did something.
He did, like, maybe he didn't always unwaveringly believe, but like when you look at the trajectory of his life, it was faith, right? And so that is an encouragement I would give if you're someone who's like, maybe my faith is dead. I don't do enough for God, whatever. It's like every once in a while, it is nice to go back and look at the trajectory of your life and be like, you know what? If you've been talking about spiritual, like getting in tune with God or whatever, however you put it, for so long, you've never done anything, like you're still stuck in the same sins you've been forever, you're still like in the same patterns forever. It's like, maybe you don't have faith. But if you're like, you know what, when I look back at the last 20 years, like I've actually come a long way. Like maybe you can be gracious with yourself and just realize like maybe God's just trying to reveal the next leg of the journey for you. But that doesn't mean you're not a Christian. That just means he's revealing for you the next leg of the journey, and you've come a long way. That celebrate that, but keep moving forward. Don't get comfortable. Don't sit down, but keep moving forward. Because we are, I think, like trajectory of life and change over long periods of time is how we can see if faith really is there. And also, it seems to be what God cares about. He who perseveres to the end will be saved. This idea of like faith being a long obedience in the same direction. And so don't be discouraged if you have moments of lack of faith, or you have to get rebuked by Jesus because now you're trusting in yourself, or you're in a place right now. It's like, that doesn't mean you're not a Christian. It might just mean Jesus is inviting you to start believing rightly once again and obeying him in faith.
Well, I think that's a wrap on the spiritual warfare.
The whole series, we did it.
And if you have any more questions, we are at the top of the episode. I said we're doing a Q&A episode. We're hoping to get so many questions from you guys. So again, 3crosses.church/fall25. There's a portal that you can either submit anonymously or let us know who you are. We can shout you out on the podcast. We'd love to answer your questions, and hopefully we get enough questions to be able to have an episode. But Pastor Danny, where are we headed next as we talk about the next series? I know you mentioned a little preview into our Advent series, but
Advent. Do you remember what we said yesterday? What did Lauren say Advent means?
Arrival.
Right? Yeah. So Advent is, if you're not familiar with the word, Advent is we talk about Christmas time as Advent, but they're not the same thing. Advent is the season leading up to Christmas where we're anticipating the arrival of Jesus. And so, on one hand, right, in kind of the church calendar, until we get to Christmas is really like these 4 or 5 weeks of like longing and waiting and recognizing the world's a dark place and it's snowy and cold outside. And then like, if you're like super into liturgical Christmas, you don't put up your tree till Christmas Day, and that's when the lights turn on. Now you have 12 days of Christmas. You sing the song, right? So Advent is this time of waiting, longing for the arrival of Jesus, remembering that in the first century, but also today, we're come Lord quickly. We're waiting for Jesus to return for us. And so for Advent this year, we always do some kind of themed series in Advent to kind of prepare us for Christmas. We believe it's a beautiful, miraculous day in the course of the year. And so this year for Advent, we're walking through the book of 1 John. John starts the book in verses 1-4, just saying like, what I proclaim to you is what I saw physically. I touched it. I saw it. I proclaimed it to you, so that my joy may be complete. And so all these themes of Christmas, right? Joy, longing, like proclamation, are going to come out through the book of 1 John. So we're going to walk week by week through the book and tie it to these themes of experiencing the arrival of Jesus as we prepare for Christmas.
It's going to be great. We got the ice skating rink being built.
It'll be up and going Thanksgiving week, and so Advent starts in always
the Christmas village
as Thanksgiving ends,
and then Christmas Eve service.
Christmas Eve, I think we have 4 services this year.
4 services.
1, 2:30.
I don't know the
4 and
times.
5:30, I believe.
Start thinking about who you want to invite to Christmas Eve service.
Yeah, Christmas. If you've never been Christmas Eve at Three Crosses, it's not a normal worship service. We try to make it special, Christmassy, for folks, especially who don't normally come to church. Maybe they'll just come on Christmas Eve. And so I'm preaching a message from 1 John, but really talking about the love of Christ, how we experience it, and then how we share it, and how it goes out into the world, and how that's embodied on Christmas. So I'll do a Christmas message. We'll sing Christmas songs. We have a beautiful candle lighting. There's hot chocolate. It's a great service.
What a season. Here we go.
I know. It's Christmas at Three Crosses. I can't wait.
There we go. See you then.